Hi, Professor. My name's Chris. This is our Lab 4, your second hack, Part 1. And as we kind of get into our analysis, I just wanted to go over the flaw hypothesis methodology that I use here. Uh, we utilized the NICTO, OSWAP Zap, and Nessus scanners and tools, web applications tools to find vulnerabilities in our system. In this instance, we were able to find a cross-site vulnerability um, that showed that our system had a flaw that could be easily taken advantage of. And we'll go over the tests a little more in our next few slides. I did want to just show that, and then as we kind of go into the next slide, we're going to bring up our vulnerability map, with 1 being the least likely, and 4 being the most likely, and then 1 having the least impact and 4 having the most impact. And as you look over here, some of the big ones are out of date PHP 4.39, which is the coding, the language that they use in their system, SQL injections that are available. There's some clickjacking vulnerabilities that we have. Was able to find some web manuals and just what impact they might have as we kind of go through some of that. So I did want to show that. We're going to go over our NICTO scan and vulnerabilities. In this instance, what we're looking at here is that PHP 4.39 vulnerability being out of date. When I looked this up, it literally said it was out of date and potentially at the end of its life as far as being supported version. And what we're looking at is that it's incredibly insecure, and that it is not something that does need to be patched or updated typically. And so as we move to the next part of the scan, we were able to find a HTTP trace method. It says active, and it suggests that the host is vulnerable to cross-site tracking. And so what that is that hackers could potentially utilize monitoring activity on websites and tracking through third parties in that aspect. And so on our third vulnerability here, what we're going to be looking at is a web server manual was found. Depending on what information is on that web server manual can determine how impactful that vulnerability is. And so not having that patched and not being able to being able to find it and being able to grab it as a person that is looking for those vulnerabilities, it can be a problem. And as we got to our OWASP ZAP scan and vulnerabilities, we were able to see there was 10 alerts on our system on the Keyoptics 2 machine. What we're seeing there is the absence of anti-CSRF tokens and an SQL injection. That were listed. One was listed as high, and then the absence of anti-CSRF tokens was listed as low. And as we see, without those anti-cross-site request forgery tokens, it does become a vulnerability for hackers to be able to potentially attack and gain access through that system, because there is no secret code blocking that information. When we looked at the NICTO scan and the OSWAP ZAP scan, we were able to determine what the difference was, and that NICTO has a faster minimal setup, focuses on server, doesn't do as much, and doesn't have as much tools to be able to go through different obstacles. The OSWAP ZAP scan includes thorough application testing, and we can kind of see that with detail between the two screenshots that we saw with the NICTO scan, just giving you small details where this gives you evidence and sources and input vectors on all that, the OSWAP ZAP. And we mentioned before a few of the type of attacks in our vulnerability map. What we're looking at here is we're looking at our Nessus scan that pulled up a potential vulnerability in clickjacking, which is getting a user to click on a link or a place that takes you to another website that they can steal that data. And then we're also looking at XSS vulnerability, cross-site scripting, which allows for those to be vulnerable when the display error messages are sent out. And so those are two of our scans that we were able to find our vulnerability, some information that we'd want to go over and make sure that we're seeing what ways to harden our system through patching and securing that system. In our rest of our scan that we had here, you can kind of see the web application information disclosure had information that could be potentially create a path to the directory where users could access it and potentially have a backend entry. And then as we look into our Apache banner links distribution disclosure, that one also shared information about that the Apache web host server was running remote host. And so that's just information that users can grab that doesn't need to be available to them. And so that being able to make sure that you're protecting yourself in the best manner that you can. And as we look at the vulnerability disclosure, we see that we have a difference in opinions in some areas. Typically, we are wanting to make sure that we aren't disclosing information too soon, especially if that risk has a lot of weight to it to be exposed and not patched yet. And so typically there's, in this instance, what I would recommend is the 90-day window where you're ensuring that 90 days to develop, test, and release a security patch, and then public disclosure after that would be given. So that's the important part, is the right to know what is at stake, and then the right to know versus what is at stake, and being able to balance that. And so having a system in that aspect to coordinate that disclosure in a timely manner, but also in a safe manner where it's not being not allowing vulnerabilities, especially if with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in place, things created to protect users' information. We wouldn't want to put that more at risk that it already is if there is a vulnerability that has been recently found, our 0-day exploit or something. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And as we're looking at a specific case, as we kind of scanned our system here in the Keyoptics 2 machine, I just wanted to go over vulnerability that we did find, which is the PHP 4.3. What we're going to go is the hypothesis of what happened there, why it was out of date, and why it wasn't updated. Was it the lack of asset management? Was it a potential legacy system that didn't mix well with a newer server, or whether it's a cloud-based server of some sort? And so that's some of the ideas that we might have for this reason. In my opinion, it seemed like it might have been more of a lack of asset management and not keeping up to date and updating things outside of this, but not coming back to the PHP code. And so the root cause of that, is poor memory management. And then what it does is it fails to validate user input, which can be a very extreme flaw that can be taken advantage of for hackers to gain access to the system and be able to go where they want and see what they want and utilize. So that's kind of what we have for here for our hack as part 1.